to see everybody, and I can't see everybody on Zoom. The recording is going to be sent out to many other people. I just want to, before I introduce Lubna, say that my name is Norbert Goldfield. I'm the founder and executive director of Healing Across the Divide. This is our 20th anniversary. It's a joy to welcome everybody. I want to in particular highlight that one of our board members, Ellen Coteen, is in the audience, and I specifically want to welcome also Sophia Stasio, who's our Healing Across the Divides intern. And so thank you very much for being here. I'm going to just briefly introduce Yaela and Lubna, and they will then further introduce themselves. The format for today is going to be that they will speak for 5 or 10 minutes each, and then we'll open it up for questions. We had a very wonderful session last night that was meaningful, and I'm sure the same thing will occur today. We'll have another event in Springfield early this afternoon. So it's an honor, as it always is, for us at Healing Across the Divides to be working with amazing grantees, and the Regional Council of Unrecognized Villages leadership is no different. And you have them in front of you right now, Yaela, Rana, and Lubna. Just wonderful to have you both here locally. And so I'm going to hand it over to you to continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you for Healing Across the Divides, and specifically for this invitation and setting it all up last night, today, and later on today. My name is Yaela Rana. I'm the General Manager of the Regional Council for the Unrecognized Bedouin Villages, or the short is RCUV. I've been part of this organization for 20-some years already, so it's been a long time. Lubna later will explain what these unrecognized villages are. Apart from being part of the regional council, I also lived in a community called Hisufim, which is a kibbutz, small community on the Gaza border. So on October 7th, when Hamas came into Israel, they came into my community as well, and into my house as well. My youngest daughter, Shani, she was 12 at the time, and we hid together inside the safe room. It was 20 minutes of terror. They were in the house for 20 minutes, but we were stuck in the house with, war around us for another 24 hours. We eventually were taken out by the Israeli army the next day, out of the house. And we've been moving around since then because my community is still closed. The houses are still destroyed. And when people ask me, so what do you take? I mean, did you change your view about the world and about peace and stuff like that? My answer is, it has changed. If in the past, the peace and justice were important to me because of the idea, because I knew it was good, now I know on my flesh how important it is. That peace is the way that we can keep everybody living in safety and dignity. And so beforehand it was important, now it is even more so. And a week after October 7th, we're in the Dead Sea, I came back we got hotel rooms we had to stay in those hotel rooms for 6 months after that. But a week later, I was back to my other community, the community of the unrecognized villages, which I've been with, as I said, more than 20 years. And I found a community that was also very badly harmed with this war. The unrecognized villages, because they are not recognized, they don't exist on the Israeli map. And so when the missiles came from Gaza on October 7th, every citizen in the country has like 2 layers of protection. The top layer is the layer of what's called the Iron Dome. The missiles go and shoot the missiles, and so they don't fall on the ground. And because these villages don't exist on the Israeli maps, they didn't have any protection from the Iron Dome. And so the missiles came down to the ground. And the second level of protection we have as citizens of Israel is safe rooms which are built out of cement and steel, like I was. And I was inside mine during the 7th of October. But because they don't exist on the map, then they don't have building permits. And so therefore they live in the most minimal kind of structure possible. Anything it can be and will be destroyed by the government, mulched by the government. So there's no safe rooms. And so the chances, people were killed. People from the villages were killed with these missiles. The chances of being killed from a missile from Gaza on October 7th, if you lived in the unrecognized villages, was 20,000 times higher because of the lack of protection. So I was born and brought up in the Negev. Later on, we spoke, and Luna realized that her father and we grew up about 10 minutes drive from each other, but in totally different worlds. So, I think I'll just move it to you to talk about, what the village, who you are, and what the villages are, and after that we'll talk about the organization. Hi everyone. Hi. So I hope it was clear.
Norbert, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing.
In the council, the regional council of the unrecognized Bedouin villages, southern Palestine, this way, and I was born to two of the.
The sound is bad.
The sound is bad.
Maybe speak louder.
You can hear me now? It's good.
I think if you speak louder, we'll be able to hear you.
Okay, I can speak. This is my loudest. So today,
Is there any way to move the microphone closer to the speaker?
yeah, okay.
You want to move the whole thing closer? Let's just try speaking loud.
Is this good?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So all over again, me and Yela, we work together on the council. I am the architect of the council, Yela the head of the council, and we represent and work to give services that don't exist in the unrecognized Bedouin villages in the south. Now, when we say unrecognized, we mean villages that the government don't approve their existence, even though they existed way before the establishment of the government. I am from one of these villages, a Negev village. I was born in Negev for two different families. And while growing up, I think I can't speak. Sorry guys, there's stuff going on here. Can't see what we're doing, so we'll wait for it to settle and we'll continue. Okay. Again. So when I say Bedouins, I mean mostly citizens of Israel today, Muslims mostly.
not nomads. We are not nomads. Historically, we're also not nomads. We're semi-nomads, meaning we have a permanent area where we live and then another area where we graze. And when we say unrecognized villages, it is in relation to townships that exist in the south. So in the 1960s, Israel planned 6 townships to concentrate the Bedouins. And I grew up in one of these townships. And that actually motivated me to work with the unrecognized villages to make sure that they don't grow up in a similar township. I think that we deserve a better planning system, especially today as an architect, I can say that. I think that there's a better way to do that. And in the council, we try to actually develop means of mapping and planning for the unrecognized villages in order to demand recognition, in order to demand to be seen by the government, either on the map or on the ground. So if either one of you opens any map on the internet, the villages just don't exist. And for us as women that work in these villages and see how rich they are, how many people and life and diversity exist in these villages, we know that this is wrong and that they should appear on the map. They're very simple. They don't want to be moved to cities because their natural nature is rural nature. And we focus on trying to attain that and make just for 70, 80 years now of around 47 villages that have around 150,000 citizens that don't have infrastructure, that hasn't been having water and electricity for more than 80 years. These are citizens of Israel. Some of them work in the governmental jobs, and our work is to make justice to these people.
So just to give you more about Israel has about 9 million people who are citizens of it. Of these citizens of Israel, about 20%, just about 2 million people, are Palestinian, Arabs, mostly Muslims, some Christians. And of this minority, the Negev Bedouin are 350,000, so roughly 15%. So we're talking a minority inside a minority, all of them citizens of the country. Of the Bedouin in the Negev, the government, as Lubna has said, had concentrated half of them into townships. One of them Lubna was born in. And the other half are mostly living in their ancestral lands, mostly living in the lands that they lived before 1948, hundreds and maybe even thousands of years before 1948. When these villages are not recognized, what it means is that since you don't exist, then the government cannot plan for you. You cannot have a plan. This is a place for a house. This is a place for a road, because you don't exist, so we can't plan. But also it means that there are no roads that go into the villages. It means there's no buses going into the villages. It means there's no water, no electricity, because you need a plan for that. And if you don't exist, then you're not planned. If you're not planned, then you don't get these things. The RCUV was created in 1997 by the leadership of these villages. So they said, okay, we're trying to go, we're trying to correct 2 sayings of the government. One is that we have no leadership. Here we are, we're organizing our leadership. And 2, that we don't know what we want. So we're going to now tell you what we want. The RCUV, the Regional Council, tries to emulate a governmentally created regional council. So I live in Kibbutz Kisrim. I live in a small community. My community is part of a regional council that that is of all these communities together. This is a governmental regional council, and like we vote. And so the leadership of the villages said, we're doing the same thing exactly. We have 47 villages, every village will have a committee. And these representatives elect the head of the RC. So it's an elected body. And the head of the RCB today is Atiya El Assam, and he is the elected leader. We all work with this leadership. So I'm the general manager, and Lubna is the planner architect of the organization. The RCB has its aim is, first of all, to make the government recognize the villages. Okay, that's the most important thing. Say these villages exist. Start the process. And the other one is to make sure that the people inside the villages get their rights. So, for example, schools, public transport, water, and after recognition, also building. But we have succeeded. For example, there are schools in the villages even before they're recognized, because we went to the Supreme Court and we said, you should not tell these children you can't get schooling, or your schooling is very difficult to get because you live in an unrecognized village. They deserve schooling anyhow. So that's what the RCB has been working towards. I came back from the United States with my PhD. And I grew up in the Negev. And the first time I walked into a village, I was shocked. I was shocked because what I saw was the results of the policies of non-recognition. And these were my neighbors. And I never, in all the years that I grew up, 10 minutes drive away from all the years that I drove along the same road that we all shared on the way to the main city of Beersheba, I had never been exposed. You grow up as a Jew in the town of Arad, and you don't know that these are your neighbors. The houses are made out of tin. Kids were walking around barefoot. And again, for me, the biggest shock was I had never known about this growing up here. So that's when I started, working with the people of the villages. And for me now, they're my neighbors, they're my community. Okay? In Israel, we're taught that there is two communities. One is Jewish and one Palestinian, Arab, Muslim community. But for me, my neighbors and I, we are the community. So that's going into a different way of looking at where I belong and who are my people.
It's a very complex topic, to be honest. Many people don't be worried that it's still not clear what we are talking about, because even in Israel, many Arabs don't know anything about this topic, about the villages. They don't know what it means for me to be a Bedouin architect. And I'm still also learning what does that mean. So maybe it will help if I start by sharing my personal story and how I got to the RCUB and why the RCUB was the only body that could have helped me work the work I believe should be done in the South. So I grew up to two Bedouin parents that were at the end of the military siege. You probably heard about the military.
No, I didn't.
You didn't. So it was a tough year at the end of the 70s. My parents were young. Also probably the barefoot people near Lhasa in the village. And they pursued education, and it matters. And they were actually encouraged by their environment to do something for themselves, because there was something about them. So both ended up being the pioneer educated Bedouins in the south. And I grew up to these parents. Now, our house was a concrete house. It was a generic box of concrete. But from their stories, I hear that they grew up in tents that are made from black goat hair. And I've never could grasp why there is such a big difference between our two generations. And I concluded that this has probably affected us as a society, this huge jump between only one generation. And later on, another gap appeared in my environment, and especially in my space, which was the difference between me and my neighbors, where my generic house had water and electricity because it was recognized by Israel at the 60s, but it was actually built at the end of the 90s, while my neighbors didn't have the same accesses and the same infrastructures that I had. So these two questions about the huge differences between the generations as a result of the forced modernization that the government did to the Bedouins and how it affected us as a society and as an environment. And the other subject of the big gap between the two sides of the map, where one side is recognized and the other is recognized, and how is this developing and what does it cost to us, made me get to the conclusion that we must work on fixing these gaps and looking at them and learning them. And architecture was for me a very interesting toolkit to start doing that, analyzing, observing, and mapping. So Yela hasn't spoken about the demolitions that are happening in the south today, and it's getting worse the last year with Ben-Gvir being responsible on that aspect and wanting to show muscles and show how he controls the south. The first victim of this ideology is the Bedouins, and people don't speak about it enough. The villages are the first victim of this new government. And for me, the first time I started mapping was when I saw a demolition. And I realized that this is erasing my only option to know my people, to learn. Because the villages, at the end of the day, they are our origins. For us people that grew up in concrete houses, the villages were a place where we visit to know something about ourselves, and they were erased. So with the demolitions occurring, and it was very little demolition. They would demolish some houses here, some houses there, not like today. Today we are speaking about villages demolition. I started mapping each village, and with these maps, at the end of the day, was encouraged to reach to the council the last year, especially after the war, and start working on professionally mapping the villages, putting them on the maps, having them, showing the life that exists in them in order to plan them. And I know it sounds absurd because right now the government is not someone to speak with about planning the villages, but we are building the ground for the action of recognition in the future, which is the only way to save the villages.
Thanks. So the RCUV, what Lubna has just described, is one of the three legs that the RCUV is standing upon. So I said our aim is to get the villages recognized and later on also planned and bring services. So how do we do it? What are the steps we're taking so this will happen? So we have, as I said, three legs that we stand on firmly. One is the planning, in order to give the government the tools of how to recognize the villages, saying, hey, it can be done. This is how it should be done. And the other one, the first one is community strength. So the Bedouin culture within itself has very strong solidarity. Solidarities to your family, to extended family, to your community. And the RSUV is like an umbrella that they created for themselves to create Pan Negev, Pan Bedouin solidarity. So we can stand together, united, in order to bring about these rights. So the first thing we're doing is working with the community. We have the villages, the village committees. We work together with the leadership, and over the last year and a bit, we've also managed with a bit stronger financially, and so we're also working with women leaders, and that's also thanks to you. And so that way we get the Bedouin culture is men separate from women, and so initially we started with the men, and now we're working alongside with the women. For example, Laila, who is our community leader, will be standing in Parliament on Tuesday, this Tuesday, to talk in one of the parliamentary committees about the fact that the lack of preschools that we have contributes strongly and directly to poverty. So it's not just that they're talking inside the villages, they're after coming to the parliament and talking in the parliament about what is important to them. So community is building community strength and solidarity is the other leg. And the third leg is media. Over the last 10 years, and more so over the last few years, the right wing has spewed racist jargon about the Bedouins in the media. And they did it in order to strengthen the right. So maybe a comparable thing that you would see in the United States would be the way that migration is spoken about. So all this negative stereotypes of migrants in order to strengthen the right. So in Israel, we don't do it against migrants because they're Jewish. We do it against the Bedouins. It is done against the Bedouins.
Who are citizens of Israel.
Who are citizens of Israel. These are not migrants. These are people that were there before us. But that strengthens the right. So they talk about very negative, very racist things in the media. And so we are working now, we're putting a lot of effort into creating media that shows the truth as it is. So for example, on October 7th, the day that we were attacked, the Bedouin were also attacked. We have several people that were killed together with the people in my community and other communities because they were part of our community, not living with us, but working with us. Several of the people that were killed working inside with us in our agriculture, inside the dairy farms. Several Bedouins came and saved us. I mean, even one of my sons that escaped from my community, the only minibuses that were willing to come and collect people and take them out were with Bedouin drivers. So they came and they saved us. A couple were killed. Bedouin people that came to save us were killed while trying to do so. So what I spoke of earlier on, that for me, this community is my community. It's true also for the Bedouin. For them, we are one community. And we are presenting that in the media. We're showing to the media who we really are, rather than all this racist slur that has been spent out there. We understand that we must have the Jewish community viewing the Bedouin community as they are, not just the way they're being portrayed by the right wing pushing it into the media. They spend millions of dollars on pushing a racist slur in the media. So those are our three legs. And you spoke about demolitions. With lack of planning, every house that is built to roof a family does not have the permits needed, and so therefore it's an illegal building because there's no way to get those permits. And so the government has, I mean, in its view, the government has been demolishing homes, a lot of homes, but it has been demolishing homes in order to try and tighten and concentrate within the villages the houses that people are living in. So, for example, a person got married or wishes to get married and will build his house over here, not too far from his parents. The government will demolish this house so that he will build it here, really close to his parents, or not at all, and live with his parents and his own children. So these houses, which are tin homes, they're not very big, sometimes house 30 people inside of them, 3 generations. And then this new government has taken it a step further. If beforehand these demolitions, there were thousands of homes demolished every year, thousands, that's a lot. But the new policies is to destroy villages, just to erase them. And not just erase them, at the same time, Israel is planning and even creating Jewish communities on their place. And so it is the most, I think the one that we know about that's most inside our imagination is the village of Umm. That village has actually gone through the process of the government wishing to erase it for the last decade. So initially it goes through the planning system, and then from the planning system, you look into the courts, got all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, you know what? Yeah, you're right. You were put there, but you know what, by the government. But you know what? We've already started to put a Jewish community instead of you, so they can continue getting you out of there and putting a Jewish community. And still, we still had some checks and balances in our country that made the actual demolition and destruction of this village slow. But now with Ben-Gvir as the head of the police, he said, okay, just destroy it. And so Umm-el-Khiran, which was destroyed 3 weeks ago, was the 3rd village to be destroyed, 4th village to be destroyed over the last 4 months. So they come with police, they come with bulldozers, they destroy the entire village, and people are like, so where do we go right now? Some go, at least temporarily, to the homes of the parents of the wife, which not necessarily lives there. Some just build little tents. In all these villages, they came back, the police and the bulldozers came back and destroyed the tents, and even uprooted the trees that the tents were put underneath so they will not have shade. And so the destruction of villages, so 4 have been destroyed. There's 10 more which are slotted to be destroyed, entire villages. The next one is on the 31st of December. Then we have another one in January. So Wadi Khalid has been destroyed. Al-Anami has been destroyed. Yeah, I know them all. I mean, it's not just that I know their names by heart. We know the people that live there. So it's very painful to talk about. Ras Jaraba is the next one. And it's being destroyed so that the city of Dimona can grow onto their village lands. And they've been petitioning the city of Dimona and the government, will we be part of the city? Will you just let us have a neighborhood here at the edge of the city? And no, because the authority that's in charge of the Bedouins cannot authorize a neighborhood inside the Jewish city, and only authorize a neighborhood inside the Bedouin city, inside an Arab city. So that's what we're facing right now. But we also, we're talking about lots of black and big stuff. We also have successes. Okay, we've been around since 1997. We have brought about the recognition of 17 villages. So even though they're not yet planned, they're there. These villages, after they are recognized, they can't be destroyed. They can't be, they can be planned badly. And this is why the job that Lubna is leading is so important, that it won't be an urban plan, it'll be a village plan, won't be, a plan of a city, but a plan of a village. So we have brought about the recognition of 17 villages. We realize that it's not enough. We need to change a bit our strategy. So in the past, what we said is, please recognize the village. Now, with Lubna leading it, we're not just saying recognize the village, we'll also tell you how to plan it. Because the villages have been recognized, but beyond putting a school in the village, nothing has changed. Okay, so this is why we're changing our strategies as well. We have utilized the Supreme Court in anything we could. For example, on the 23rd of December, we're going to be in the Supreme Court discussing the right for shelters for the communities that will not be vulnerable to these missiles. After the 7th of October, we had 2 missile attacks by Iran, and it's difficult to describe the fear of the women, the children, the families, knowing that Iran's sending missiles and they have no way to be protected. That night, many of the community ran and tried to hide under bridges that, like the road bridges, so they could be safe with their children all night long. So we're doing what we can, and we are somewhat succeeding. And also with your help, one of the things that Healing Across the Divide has provided for us is counseling and trauma, because as I belong to a Jewish community on the border, and yes, we were traumatized, but on the other hand, the government is giving me and my community the service needed to deal with this trauma. But the people in the villages are getting nothing. And so they're getting the missiles, they're getting the death, they're getting the destruction, but they're not getting the services to deal with the trauma. And so Healing Across the Divide is working with us. We have Amira Buhadube, which is the professional person that sits with small groups of women and trying to help them recognize trauma, give them tools to deal with trauma for themselves, for their children, for their men in the family. And so we're doing that as well, and it's been really good. I mean, for example, beyond the basics of learning how to recognize and how to deal with it, other things that come out of these meetings with the women. For example, one of the Laila, who's our community organizer women, she told them they were sitting together, and there was an older woman my age, and there was a younger woman her age, and the younger woman had just married the son of the older woman, and she had stopped her schooling because of it. And the mother-in-law heard that, and she said, "No, you go back to school, and I will take care of the children." So things like that happen in this kind of setting in which the women are invited to create a community even stronger than before. I'd like to add. I think we could open it out. No? One more thing then. Just one more thing before I if I may then.
Okay.
No? Okay. So the last thing is, being attacked on October 7th, and then moving down to the Dead Sea with my community. One of the things that I became extremely aware of is the importance of solidarity. So we were a community that was attacked, we were pushed out, and put in a hotel. Hotels are no fun. I don't know why people go to hotels. But people in Israel reached out to us. Everybody did everything they could so that we would feel that we are not alone in this. Jewish communities in the United States also reached out to us. They helped in anything physical that they could, but they also helped by it. As somebody who was there on the receiving side, it was really important to know that people are standing with us and telling us, this horror doesn't belong to you alone. It belongs to all of us, and we're here for you. And anyway, physically, money and clothes. We had no clothes, and anything that we need. Now, the people of the villages are facing horrific policies of destruction. And so now it's our turn to stand with them. And it is really important. It's hard to describe how important it is for the receiving side to receive as much both support and also emotional support, knowing that they're not having to go through this alone. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we open it up for questions, just want to make a couple of observations. The project that we're funding, with the Regional Council on Recognized Villages was specifically focused on the trauma of women who have suffered after October 7th. So there may be some questions about that afterwards. It wasn't really discussed in very much detail. Secondly, this initiative, this community group that we're funding, is one of 14 groups. And so later, after we conclude, there's information both about our 20th anniversary, and secondly, there's information about. Lastly, what I'd like to do is really open it up for comments and questions. Morty Kamel, who is a board member of Healing Across the Divide, is controlling the Zoom, and I'm sure he'll be monitoring the chat. And so if there's some questions from the chat that come up, but in the meantime, we have time, and it's a joy to have everybody here. And we'll open it up for questions of any sort. Yeah.
Just from the perspective of the Zoom, please just go to reactions, raise your hand so that I will be able to see you, and then I will be able to get you to ask your question.
What I'll do is I'll repeat the question. That'll probably
Okay,
be
but
easier.
the point is, we have to know who's asking.
Let's
He's
people
talking
on
to the
Zoom,
Zoom people.
how are they gonna get lost? Go ahead, Jen.
I lived in Beersheba in 1979, first time I got a job here. And we suffered from this pesticide plant, Maheshim, which was the main industry for the Negev, which was poisonous, and we didn't filter waste. So we moved out after a year because I had nerve damage, and because women couldn't get pregnant. And in 2004, my youngest son was in Israel and saw that Naftashim had been moved out to Bedouin territory in the Negev.
That's true.
And I'm wondering if it's still there. And just curious because it was certainly a serious health issue, particularly for women and children. And perhaps they figured out technology. Okay, so it makes me sick because so just.
So before, the question pertaining to a pesticide named Mahdashim, and that Jane Myers was exposed to, and she had a question as to whether or not this pesticide, which apparently the plant was moved near to where the Bedouin lived, is still in existence, and if anything can be done about it.
The birds are run for well. The bells?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a dangerous industrial area that is about 10 kilometers south of Beersheba now, and it's adjacent to a huge unrecognized village. It's got 12,000 people called Wadi Nam. And recently, like about 5 years ago, Israel also moved some army bases even further south, not that far from there. And there was a cry in the country, you're not moving our sons and children who are soldiers next to this dangerous chemical industry. And so they cleaned it up a bit. And so it was, even though 10,000 children and women who couldn't get pregnant, and kids who got asthma were living next to it, these people were pushed off their land to this side. And then this farm, it's an industrial area, was put on their lands, and it was poisoning them. So it's still there. It is a bit better because there's now an army base not that far. But you know, I can talk to you on the details that are, you know, for forever, but they're using the fact that there is an industrial plant in area to tell the Bedouin of this village of Wadi Nam, well, we have to push you away. We have to concentrate because it's all dangerous. So it's an ongoing, they're both using it, they're both not caring about the Bedouins, the Bedouin village, and they're also using it cynically to concentrate this village.
And I must add that it's only another one meme that is being used. I guess the Mahdashim is another mean. There are many others that are less, let's say, poisoning, but similar in the action, the idea of, let's say, forestation, planting trees. It's also done on villages as and argued to be something that the government needs to do in the south. And the factories is another one, different kinds of factories. Phosphorus factories, that sometimes the Bedouins live in areas that has some mineral that they argue that they must build a factory in there. So what happens is that the villages tremble between all these plans and factories and forests and new settlements and military bases, and they're always asked to move. Now, where they can move, no one has an answer. So that's why people,
Janelle?
the Bedouin people can't leave the poisonous area. It's an important fact, I guess it's an important point to point out that they don't have a choice. Because moving means to move to another tribe's land, and this can cause problem and be dangerous. So people find themselves in a living for generations next to factories that ruin their life, but they don't have any other choice.
Janelle Johnson has a question.
Yes,
Yeah.
my question is, will we be able for the upcoming study tour to meet with both of you? And are we visiting one of the affected Bedouin villages?
The answer is yes. So that's a good plug for the study tour. There are several people who are in the audience physically, and some of the people who are in the audience by Zoom who've been on the study tour. The study tour is planned for the beginning of April 2025, and I'll be there. I hope that you'll be there too. Thanks for asking, Janelle. And Janelle,
2025 and March 30th, right, to April 9th, I believe are the exact dates.
okay, well, you know it better than I do.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. We have a question in the chat, and it's a question from Beth Brown regarding the water supply. And the question is water trucked in to fill cisterns? And is there any cooperative agreement with between kibbutzim and the villages?
You must.
Thank you.
A question for you.
Okay. When I grew up again with the time that Lubna's parents grew up and in the Negev, and at that time, the only way that people could get water is they would need to go to the main roads in the 2 or 3 main roads in the Negev. And then there would be somebody who had a contract with the Israeli water company, and he would stand by the tap. They would fill up these tankers that they would carry behind tractors and bring it to their village. So sometimes it would take 2 hours of standing to fill up your water tank, and sometimes there were 3 water tanks in a line. And so you would spend half a day just to fill up a water tank that would be sufficient for your family for 3 days. It became a little better, and you could actually connect your, like a garden hose that would still travel for like 3 miles to these water connections. Anyhow, it was horrible. And then Israel afterwards put the price up. Unless if you were living in a municipality and the municipality used a water private carrier, then the price would be low. But if you have a contract directly with the Israeli water company, the price was at the maximum. So it was like 3 times more expensive than I would pay. And Lubna said, this is mine, because eventually we managed, this is how we work. You know, this is a good example of our way of working. The regional council, right. So Atia and I went to, Atia, my boss, the head of the RCUV, and I went to the Israeli Water Authority. And we said, look, this is ridiculous. You have the most poor people and the poorest people in the country, but paying the highest prices for the worst water supply possible. And they agreed with us. But these are not politicians, these are bureaucrats, but it's decent ones. So we found a decent bureaucrat. And they agreed with us. And they started a pilot. Okay, they called it a pilot because they wanted it to change. And so they got a private water company to start giving out water in 2-3 locations in the Negev. And then they wanted to enlarge it over the whole Negev, but then they got stuck with politicians. And so what we did, we were talking with them. At one point they asked us, could you please go to the courts to demand water, because we don't have, politicians won't let us give you water, so you have to go through the courts and we will give you water then. But every single family that wanted this new kind of connection to the water supply through this private company, which would put down the price to 1/3, I had to win. Ma'egel El-Awashle, as a community organizer, got the call from the family. He and I would go to the family. Okay, we're talking about extended family, 50 people. Every one of these families, I wrote a letter for to the water company, water authority. Please, can we, this family, because of these reasons, needs to be connected to the water, the private water company. So I think I wrote during that year, I don't know, hundreds. Everyone I had to go, we went together to the community. We had to give them the location of the house, the location of the closest water tap. It was, but we managed. I mean, we did the work. We found the person in the bureaucracy that we would work with. We worked with them until everybody in the Negev that is close enough to the water, main water taps, now can receive water at the reasonable price. Still going in these little taps, these little water hose pipes that you would have in your garden, all the way to their homes. And so for some, it's not much. And for everybody, the pipes heat up in the summer, and so the water gets there hot. But it's a huge difference from what it was 5 years beforehand. So yeah, that's how we do everything we can to provide these kind of rights to the people. It's not service, this is a right. Water to your house is a right.
And I think what, just to add a little
Okay,
to what Tiara said, is in order to get these rights, from what I've seen so far, we must work together. It's a moment when people that understand in laws and in bureaucratics like Kiela and others, and the Bedouins that scream their demands meet and strategically think, how can we get our rights properly? Because the Bedouins can't do that alone, and the Jewish Israelis can't do that alone either. So this every improvement in the village's life and every improvement we vision to come to the villages is a result of the work that occurs together, not separately.
First, Cohen.
Yeah, you said that you managed to get recognition for 14 villages. 17. How were you able to do that? What's the difference between the ones that you can get recognized and the ones that
Repeat the question. Yes, thank you. The question was, what's the difference in how were you able to get 17 villages recognized and many other villages not recognized? What's the difference in terms of the process, the politics, the other variables? Thank you.
The answer is, I don't know how much you guys have experience in working in this kind of, human rights. There's violations of human rights because the government wishes to violate these human rights. This is why there are violations. And so what we need to do all the time is find a tactic or strategy that will help us change. The creation of the RCUB in 1997, the first thing they did is they said, okay, the government calls us tribes, the government calls us the dispersion, the dispersed people. We will change our names back to who we are. We are villages. And so the first thing they did is they named their villages once more. So rather than where are you from? Oh, I live next to. No, I live in Abu Tlu, not next to it. This isn't the name of my village. So initially, that beginning of the work, the government was caught surprised. And it therefore started a process of recognition because of the work that the RCUB did. And it worked so far, and then the government fixed that, okay? So we have to change our strategies. The last, so there were like the first 7 that were recognized were villages which were historical villages, big villages, villages where most of the leadership came out of. The government hoped they would recognize these villages, create a dividing rule between the ones that they have recognized and the ones that should not yet recognized, and weaken the rest of the struggle. And so it didn't mean the villages were recognized, they did not weaken the struggle. Okay. I'll give you the example of the last 4 villages that we got recognized, how we did that one. Again, we changed strategy every time. This last strategy that we had before the one that now Lumna is leading, our leadership, when I say our leadership, it's the Ra'am party, when Mansour Abbas was leading. You know, member of Knesset Mansour Abbas of the Ra'am party. And we also had a member of Knesset from the Bedouin community, an amazing guy, Saeed al-Khoumi, that was part of this party. They said, we are joining the coalition in order to fight for these rights. Unluckily, Saeed died while early on in this coalition, while the coalition was on. And so Mansour Abbas and the party looked for somebody that would work in the back office. Mansour said, I'll take upon myself the issue of the unrecognized villages, to work for the recognition and the rights. And they looked for a couple of weeks for somebody who would be the back office worker for Mansour Abbas. And they were looking for a Bedouin person. But it was like, from today to tomorrow, can somebody please come and work? They couldn't find anybody, and they asked me to do it. I've been part of this organization for many years by this point. And the leadership of the villages said, yes, we trust her, take her. And so together, Mansour being the amazing political leader, me being in the back office, giving him all the information, preparing the papers, 4 more villages were recognized. So we work with what we can, and all the time we think, okay, what's the next step? And so we're hoping now, with this government, I don't believe we'll get a village recognized. But this is why Lubna is leading this new way of thinking about planning and suggesting recognition of the villages. So maybe now when we recognize a village that is already planned, we ask to recognize a village that comes with plans, that comes with the right way of thinking about village lands. God willing, with the next government, hopefully we'll get some more villages recognized.
Because many times the villages are viewed as scattered, as something random that doesn't have a shape, that doesn't have many content in it. And what we're doing is actually show how rich the villages are. And if there's willingness to see that, we invite people in the council. We show them either in tours, but now also in maps, interactive maps, that can show them stories, that can show them characters. Suddenly you open a map and you see a woman and her story, and the sites that she visited in the village, and where she goes to work, and where there's a well, and where there's an old house. And this gives the government and us an opportunity to see that these villages are no threat. These are just people that want to develop their homes, they want to live a decent life, and we try to provide that in sensible visuals and tools and methods. And when we say planning, we actually mean communication that most governments take seriously.
One of the villages, I believe, that was recognized recently was Rahman.
Right.
So Rahman, for those of you who remember, have been on a study tour.
Yes.
We funded, one of the grants that we gave was to a joint venture between the recognized village town of Yerucham, which is a Jewish town, and the unrecognized village at that time of Rahman. And I still remember, even though we live in a rural area, we always look at how are we going to measure outcomes of what we do. So I said, the intervention was a farm. I said, the reality is, I don't know anything about farms, and I don't think anybody in our board or our medical advisory board knows about farms. How are we going to go about this? And as it turns out, one of the people on the study tour, I'm not sure who was one of you, his wife So John Falk and Margie Falk, were either any of you on that? Anyway, Margie Falk worked at the New York Botanical Garden, and she gave us advice as to how we could measure the outcomes, which were improved communication and improved nutrition. One last story about that. Until about 2020, we brought the groups together, both Palestinian in the West Bank and Israeli groups together in East Jerusalem. Starting in 2020, before the pandemic, the Israeli army wouldn't allow the groups to come. And I'll never forget the day, because the groups always would say that they did not want it to be publicized that the meetings were occurring, because both sides were afraid that they would get harassed by their own, publics. And a woman from Yeroham and Rachna came up to me afterwards and said they were so moved because they had met people from, again, I'm not sure if you were on that study tour, where people from the Family Defense Society, which established the first women's shelter in the West Bank at Nablus, and we were funding them. And they were talking about how they met together with these people from Nablus, which is about, from here to Hartford, just to get, a little bit over an hour away by driving. There were no checkpoints and minor details like that. And it almost brought tears to my eyes about how they said this is a once in a lifetime meeting that we've had with these people from Nablus that just never would have occurred. So this was all starting with people from Rachna, which was an unrecognized fellow, and eventually through your amazing work become recognized. David.
So you identified one bureaucrat with the water department that was on your side. My question is the image, but politicians interfere. So the image that comes to mind is that all the politicians uniformly in government are working to destroy the villages. But there must be, or the question is, might there be some segment of the Israeli government and the larger society as a whole that is in favor of, that can be allies to you, that give you hope for either now or in the future, that could grow and become your allies in the effort?
Did you hear the question? Yes, because David has a strong voice.
So beginning of the answer I think I gave when I said Mansour Abbas was part of the coalition.
Right.
And so, yes, we know to find our partners, and we know to find the places where even politicians can be moved to help this issue. Absolutely, no question about it. Even today, like last month, Tia and I again, we went to visit Yair Golan. I don't know if you know the name. He is the leader of the new connected parties of Labor and Meretz, and they call themselves the Democratic Party, the Israeli Democratic Party now. So he's leading it. So we went to his office in Tel Aviv, and we introduced ourselves, and we said, we want you to know us. We want you to know he knows about it. It's not that he doesn't, but we wanted to make it more important to him. Not because he can do anything about it right now, probably very little, but God willing, he will be able to do something about it when we change our government, which God willing, we will. So we're doing that all the time thinking ahead. And again, the planning of the villages is not so that Ben-Gvir will accept these plans, he will not. But with the assumption that we can make sufficient inroads within the political system to get people to say, okay, let's give this a try. So yes, we're trying it all the time. And yes, and also I'd like to answer the part about the Israeli society. Israeli society is also quite ignorant about the issue of the unrecognized villages. You spoke about the Palestinians were Israeli citizens, but the Jews, barely anybody knows about it. But now they're starting to know about it, because that is the third leg we're working. We hired a really professional media person who used to work in Haaretz newspaper beforehand. And his name is Nati Yeket. And he is working amazingly to put our issues, the issues of the non-recognition. We've changed the rhetoric, again, thanks to Nati, in the way we think about getting into the Israeli public and getting their support, from talking about demolitions to talking about population replacement. Because when you talk about a demolition, a person says, well, he built illegally, of course they should demolish his house. But when you talk about population replacement, then you're explaining this is not an issue of legality. It's an issue of who should be living there, the people who are living. Don't replace them. Let them live there. Let them have their villages. I'd like to add, I have been listening to Lubna a lot over the last, we worked together, so many hours, 30 hours of flight and some work. And listening to Lubna, it's been inspiring to hear about the beauty of the villages. Okay, so for Lubna, it's something that you talked about, your roots and understanding who you are. I, as a Jew who go into a village, I see, of course, the results of the policies, which are poverty. But I'm also strongly aware that this is a wonderful culture. And the culture is set in the geography of the village. And we still have half the population living in villages. The government is doing everything it can to concentrate and urbanize and modernize, which is good for no one. I mean, certainly not for the people, but it's not good for Israel either. Why would we have, what benefit could there be to force modernization, urbanization of an amazing people, an amazing culture? So that is something that is important for me. Why are we doing it? We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but it is by far the most, it's very right, okay? It's very wrong not to do it.
And
Okay,
the
we
next
have,
question, last point. The name of my request is the government have a very big plan in the south, that is called the Beersheba Metropolis. Beersheba Metropolis. And a lot of its effort is to make this vision of Beersheba and the south being a big metropolis of Israel to happen and to be successful. Now, within this plan, there's a lot of land use that is named special living patterns. And what we in the council say that the Bedouin way of living and the Bedouin culture is actually adding to this metropolis a new color, a new pattern, because right now they're breaking their head thinking, how can we make the South interesting? How can we make the South a place for tourists to come? Because there is no beach, there are no rivers. How can you make people come to such a hot area? And the Bedouins are kind of the only answer to that, if you think about it. And within this plan, we actually use this small line that wants the metropolis to be a unique part of Israel. And if you look at the whole borders of Israel, it's half of the map. It's half of the map that today is, people are running away from the south because there's not a lot. And we think that if the Bedouins will be encouraged and their culture will be encouraged to be there and to host people without feeling that they need to protect themselves. Because historically we hosted people. We would open our hearts to people that come to drink tea and coffee with us. Today we are more afraid. We feel like this person might tell the government something about me. I don't know what will happen. So if we will be encouraged to keep on doing this, I believe, and also Yala, we share this vision and in the council, that good will come out of it for the government, for our neighbors, for ourselves. And this is a main important thing we keep on dreaming about.
It's a win-win situation.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
we have
Some other questions?
We have two questions in the chat.
We'll have one question from here, then we'll come to the chat, okay?
Okay.
I just want to introduce
Sure.
Rabba Rudy Kasovsky and
Thank
her
you.
husband, Rabbi
Thank you.
David Sagi.
Thank you. I'm one of the local rabbis here, but yeah, one of the rabbis here. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like I'm feeling very emotional and also very like so many questions and some you've already touched on, but Well, one, I just want to say, Dave and I used to be connected to a woman who ran an organization called Bustan, which was doing,
Oh, I know.
Laura Rouse used to be involved. So we actually named our son's middle name is Bustan. And so for this, because we've just, but somehow between that and the last 20 years, I feel like my education is just like exploded, and it's just so heartbreaking. And I'm so energized to meet you both. And the question of sort of like the big picture of like how to change like Jewish Israeli society in the media. But so that was part. I was glad you just brought that up, because that was going to be one of my questions. Like how do we actually change that picture? Like what can we do? And also in the ways that I felt like after October 7th, the Jewish community here was very mobilized to show specific support to different kibbutzim and things. And how can we do that for the Bedouin communities also, to like either individually or as communities here, to actually show that we're here and we want to support you also.
So the question is, from Rabbi Ricky Kosovsky, is how can we in general here locally, or all of you on the Zoom, can provide support to the Bedouin in southern Israel? Would that be fair?
Yeah, and also how can we help really support the like re-education of everyone? You know, it's just, and I've just been watching, it's just so heartbreaking how there's, you know, the media is like holding up the Bedouin hostage that was saved, but at the same time destroying villages. It's just like the disconnect is just so horrendous.
Or to be specific, how can the media both highlight and look to the Bedouin hostage who was freed, while at the same time destroying Bedouin
Just as an
villages?
example.
More
Looking at-
specifically,
So
they
how-
announced that they were not going to destroy his house, but they destroyed the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, and how can we support that, you know, as educators here, et cetera?
Well, first of all, we have a newsletter, and I encourage you all to register to the newsletter.
And you will all get information about that newsletter. Everybody who's here physically and everybody who's on this.
We also have a WhatsApp group. I don't know if you're a WhatsApp person, but we have a WhatsApp group of news from the RCB in English. We have that too, and we have to put you on. Nati, that I spoke of beforehand, he creates these WhatsApps, okay, that I have to just share on my Facebook, and so that's one of my ways of the RCB makes it easy for you to share the information, and that's the idea. Regarding how your community, and it's a wonderful question, by the way, it feels really wonderful to hear such a question. And I'm thinking that the way that your communities have supported us after October 7th would be a similar one. So getting to know, come visit.
Study tour.
Community to community. So your community, your synagogue to a specific community, specific village. So you can create personal relationships. And talk with the village and say, okay, what's the next thing we can actually like maybe fundraise to support to create? Those I think are the questions that, or the possible answers.
I would also like to add that I don't know what the Stand initiative is. I would love to hear about it. But there is a lot of ways, I think, to help the villages in the south. I'm an architect, but I end up being everything. And my father always makes a joke about me that I became a kolbo. And I don't know if you know what a kolbo in the kibbutz is. It's this shop where they have everything in it. And this is kind of the ways you learn how to function within the villages in order to help, because every help is needed. Again, as Yala said, that the council became like a government for them, that's trying to give them the services they're not getting. But my attitude towards people that wants to help is that help with the things you're good at. So it can be very unique and special support. So I think you can either in an educational tour or any other visit or meeting with the council or with people of the villages, can share what you can help with in general. And I think people will automatically know where it's needed, and you find your way of doing that.
Question on the chat.
Yeah. Kathy Levine asks, what role does the HATD project play in building the overall movement for civil rights among Bedouin in Israel?
Can you repeat it? Okay.
You understood.
Yeah, the question is how much healing across the divides, right?
What's the connection between the trauma, working on the trauma that occurred after October 7th, and how does that translate to issues of civil rights? Which it does, but you'll have to answer.
Okay. Well, thanks to healing across the divide, we are creating, we have our women community organizer, and she creates the groups of women that afterwards Amira, who's the professional, comes and talks to these women. And the main reason for these meetings are to give professional tools of recognizing and dealing with trauma. But of course, since we have already these meetings, for us, it's a way of getting to talk to the community through the women. And so therefore, in these meetings, and we keep on meeting after the three set meetings, which are trauma, dealing with trauma meetings, we keep on meeting these women. And what we are trying to do is like many things. We ask the women, what's important to you? Okay, so what do you need that is really affecting your life that needs to be changed? And many things come up. For example, another thing that came up is we have undocumented people among the Bedouin. They either married into a Bedouin Israeli family, but they came from the West Bank. Or we even have recently, like a few hundred people that came and were invited from the Sinai, which is now Egypt, into Israel. And they're living in Israel for the last 50 years, 40 years. And Israel, even though they invited them, are not giving them citizenship. And so they're totally undocumented. And so these issues came up from the meetings. And so the questions that came up were, for example, we don't get health insurance, national health insurance. So people die of cancer because they can't go to the hospital because they can't pay for it. And so we're now, thanks to the meetings that Laila and Amira are doing, we're meeting groups of women. And thanks to meeting these groups of women, we are listening to their needs and stories. And thanks to listening to it, we're doing new things. So for example, end of December, the last Saturday in December, Laila and I will be joining Physicians for Human Rights, which is an Israeli-based organization that gives health rights to Palestinians mostly, and undocumented people. We're going to join them when they're going to the West Bank with their women's clinic. And we will see what happens there. And after that, we'll sit with them and talk to them and see how we can make it appropriate for the Negev, for these women, and maybe later on also not women, also men, who don't have the right to get health from the government. The Physicians for Human Rights have a clinic in Jaffa, but the Bedouin women are too terrified to drive to Jaffa because if they're stopped on the way, they can be deported. So these things come up out of these meetings. And we're trying to, there's many, many other things that have come up out of these meetings, which we're trying to create women leadership that will lead the solutions for these issues. So issues of poverty, what kind of professional training can I get? What kind of work can I get without professional trainings? We're now joining, or we're creating together a co-op of women who go out and clean. I mean, just bring some money to the house, but they need to be transported to the place that they're going to clean. They're cleaning only not private, it's just institutions. But so these things are all things that come out of the initial meetings that are thanks to you.
That question, before I go to David, came from Kathy Levine in Columbus, Ohio, who's also a board member. Thank you, Kathy. David, you have a question?
And I have another one.
Okay, so after David, we'll go back to the chat.
I'm wondering about the political rhetoric that's useful to describe, because the Israeli government's policy is cultural genocide. Actually. But people don't like to use those terms, but they're scary appropriateness. And also okay. Also the kind of policies you're talking about where let's wipe out this Bedouin village and put Jews on it. It's just so close to what people call apartheid. But again, that's the kind of word that we don't like to use. It's a scary, formidable word. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, to what degree is it possible to name this what it actually is, or is it not useful to do that? And the other part of this, the second part is the other question I have is Kakal, JNF, still implicated in destroying villages and parts? So another reason why they destroy villages, they have to plant forests there, and that's how they destroyed Atir a few years ago. First, they were going to put a Jewish town on it, but then there was enough controversy, I think, that they decided they'll do a forest instead. It's a great way to wipe out a village. Anyway, so what do you think about labeling this, and what do you think?
I must say that in the beginning of this journey, I was saying that at the beginning of this journey, when me and Yela decided to come here, make our way, and speak with people, I was afraid, personally. I was worried that I might say something wrong. I should say something that will be heard as offensive, and I won't be heard anymore. So labeling personally for me as a Palestinian Bedouin that was born with an Israeli identity is very difficult, has been very difficult the last year. I'm careful. I'm also careful answering you to your question, to be honest. And as growing up in the kibbutz, I was sent to study in a kibbutz. Since for 6 years, I was bullied for speaking up for Gaza in 2014. I was bullied by the whole kibbutz, and I was there was a collective. What is the word?
Excommunicated.
Yeah, because I posted about the kids that were killed in the beach at that time. And this is traumatic for me. It affected me while I grew up. And I think I found safe circles to speak and to say what I think and how I label things. I can say that it's something that we really need to be careful while working for the villagers, because we are already oppressed enough, and we don't want, and we are already labeled as problem makers, and being labeled as radical politicians can worsen our reality even more. But I know that people can tell that something is wrong happening, and that we experience demolitions, but something even worse is happening just right next to us, 40 kilometers, and we hear the bombing in Gaza, in the south. We've been hearing for the last year. So yes, labeling is a challenging way to put it, but naming things has been tough. About the GNF, as I answered about the factories and other efforts to take the land from the people, the GNF is one way. Actually, in our maps, we show areas where trees are being planted in all the Bedouin houses. So you can see how on the 1970s it was full of stone houses, because the Bedouins started to build stone houses in the late 70s, and how these specific areas are the areas where GNF planted trees. And this is not by accident. There's landmarks and symbols on the ground that sometimes the government likes to hide in order to say these are scattered. They don't have culture, they don't have heritage. So it's two dramatic things you point out, I believe, and we deal with them daily, on a daily basis. My father was a politician in the Knesset He was a Knesset member for 20 years. His name was Talab Astana. His name is, sorry, everyone tells me don't speak about your parents in past. They're alive, they're strong. But he was always on this thin line, walking on this thin rope between saying what's happening in the West Bank, what happened to him as Palestinian, as Bedouin, and between fighting for the rights of his people. And I grew up seeing how challenging that was. And I chose to be an architect because I don't use words. I can show it. I can show it with lines. I can show it with colors. I can show it maybe with descriptions. And these words you can see on the papers we present sometimes.
Thank you. We have time now for one more question on the chat, and then we're going to wrap up. So unless it's urgent, that's what we're going to do. And ask
Okay.
first.
Anita Jarman asked, thank you for your holy work you are doing. There are so many NGOs in Israel, Palestine doing important work. This is my first exposure to healing across the divides. I am curious, what is your relationship, if any, with AJEEC-NISPED?
Ajik Nisped.
Ajik Nisped. Hi, Veronica.
Hi.
Oh, we know Veronica.
Yes, I'm a former worker in Ajik Nisped.
Veronica, you've been here the whole time?
Yeah, she's on the Zoom.
Yes.
I was like 16 years old when I met Veronica. I volunteered in Ajik.
This organization we're talking about.
Yes. It's nice to see you.
So do you want to answer the question in terms of the relationship between RCUB and Ajik?
Sure. Ajik Nisped, which is those were the letters that made Ajik Nisped, is an established, excellent organization in the Negev. That its mission is to create work and actions that, and if Veronica wants to talk about it, because Veronica worked in Ajik and you also were in Ajik. But they put Jews and young Jews and young Palestinians, Bedouins together to work together towards a good future. So that is their mission, is to create that ability to view this whole area as ours, not Bedouin or Jews, and we're not separated, we're together, and to create this with young people. So they're 18 and 19, that's the ages of the people that are working, the Nisped and Ajik Nisped is working. So we have different goals, not that we have similar goals in the sense we want a better society, a better Negev for everybody, but we are working as the leadership of the unrecognized villages, and our aim is to recognize the villages. And so we work together. I mean, in the sense that when we need to work, we need to go into the villages with volunteers. We ask Ajik, can you please participate in this action in which we need volunteers to go to the villages? One of the examples is a nice one. The government issued food stamps. So little cards in which people could go and buy food if you were poor enough. But nobody knows where the Bedouins of the unrecognized villages live. There's no street lamps. And so the only way to get to the people of the villages was to set up volunteer spots in which volunteers came and registered the people. And so we spent, I don't know, thousands of volunteer hours registering these people food stamps. And so we needed volunteers. And so we went to Ajik and we went to the desert stars, I think. And we went to our Jewish partners around the country, and everybody participated. And the RCOB organized it. And so we actually managed to bring thousands of food stamps for thousands of families in the Negev. It's something the government could not do, but it was important for us to do for the community. That's an example of working together. Another difference is, never mind, we work together, we like work.
So as those of you who know me, I try to conclude with 3 comments. The first is it's really great to see all of you. I'm not sure why, but I see Veronica, who's our Israeli representative on the Zoom. So not only thank you for coming, but the recording is going to be present, and please circulate it to as many people as you can, because that's another way for us to get the message out. Secondly, starting next week, we'll be doing our winter fundraising effort, and there'll be a match. All of you will be hearing about it. I encourage you to support Healing Across the Divides, and you'll also be getting information about the RCUB and how you can engage and support them also. And lastly, for those of you who are on the Zoom, you're going to do something like this, but those of you who are here, please give us